Nebraska takes on Indiana to open up conference play. The question is, what does this Nebraska team look like after a bye week? Let's get into it. Hi, I'm Aaron Muller, and welcome to Cobsmacked. This is a Husker football channel where we cover the Husker season and team news. If you enjoy the content, please be sure to like the video and be sure to subscribe as well so you don't miss more videos like this. So before we get into the preview for the Indiana Hoosiers, I want to make a couple notes that happened this week. So Mickey's contract was made available to the public, and it looks like he's going to be retained regardless. So a lot of people were like, if he doesn't get the head coaching job, we're going to miss out. So I want to support him as much as I can. Support away. I am supporting him as much as I can. I would love it if he got the job. But if he doesn't and somebody else comes in, it looks like Mickey will be retained as far as his contract shows. I would assume that Bill Busch is kind of in that same category as well. It kind of makes sense anyway for whoever comes in to kind of keep, I can even see Applewhite kind of being in that category as well. So guys that have brought in recruits to this school, they know how to recruit this area. Specifically Mickey, he's kind of a top recruiter in the nation, and Bill Busch has been known in college football as like an analyst, or a lot of teams search him out for his mind. So I wouldn't be surprised if those two are kept specifically. And then Brian Applewhite seems to be doing a good job with the running backs as well, and bringing in top guys that he has shown that he can develop as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if those guys stick around. So I don't want to feel like talking about other coaching candidates is kind of crapping on Mickey, because he's going to be here regardless. He's devoted to the university and to the team as well, which you can't overlook that. So aside from that, the depth chart has been also released and it's been updated. It's not as much as a lot of people would like to see, and I think injuries kind of play into that as well. So Kevin Williams, I was hoping to see him on the offensive line this week. He's out with a high ankle sprain, Mickey Joseph said on his press conference. I expect that Vokalek and Heinrich will be back and healthier. Henrich will be back and healthier. But it looks like the offensive line had only minor changes, and a lot of that has to do with not having depth behind those starter guys. So Ethan Piper is going to get a start. They moved Corcoran out to left tackle since Teddy Prohaska is out for the season. So I mean, it's kind of a mixed bag again. You still have some guys on the line that haven't shown the fight and the desire to be on the field that you would want from your starters, or at least it hasn't appeared that way. So again, maybe having the extra bye week and Mickey being there to motivate them, and just kind of team changes in general, maybe these things will kind of play out for themselves. So now we can get into the Week 5 preview against the Indiana Hoosiers. It's in Memorial Stadium. It's a night game, so it kicks off at 6:30 on the Big Ten Network. The weather's supposed to look beautiful as far as temperature goes. It's supposed to get up to the 80s during the day, but by kickoff it should drop down to the mid-70s. There is a possibility for wind, and we'll kind of get into that later. But otherwise, it's supposed to be a beautiful game in Memorial Stadium. Indiana Hoosiers come from the Big Ten East, so they're not in our in our half of the conference, but they are still in the Big Ten. They are 3-1 on the season, with one of those games being a win in a conference. Tom Allen is their head coach, and this is his 6th season. He has a record of 29-33. So again, not super successful like you'd see like Ohio State or Michigan, things like that, but 50-50. So there's not a ton to say about him either. He's kind of a bland, like not that he's not interesting, but he's just there's not a lot to say about him. He's just a coach. So he is a defensive minded coach. That's kind of his specialty. But it's been a roller coaster, as I mentioned, under him at Indiana. So excluding that COVID season, 3 other 4 seasons have been losing records, and they've only won an average of 2.5 conference game a year over that time. So we're going to look at the offense. So they play with a ton of fast tempo. They're constantly snapping the ball. They're lining up and snapping the ball, and they're trying to keep the defense on their heels. But they try to play balanced for the most part. But they have defaulted to throwing it a ton because they are playing from behind. They have been behind at halftime every game so far this year, in all 4 games. That is kind of being led by their junior quarterback, Connor Bazelak. He is a transfer. He came in, but he has shown an ability to throw the ball and throw the ball a lot. So he's been asked to produce a lot because of his, they're behind. They can't afford to run it because they're trying to catch back up. But he's averaging 50 pass attempts a game. So that's the most offensive snaps and the most passing attempts in the country. So they've shown that they can get a lot of plays off, but How successful those are kind of up for debate. So nearly 300 of those game yards are through the air. They're averaging 300 yards in the air per game. But Baszler has only been completing 54% of his passes. He has 7 touchdowns on the year with 4 interceptions. A lot of those receptions are going to junior transfer Cam Camper, and he's the leading receiver with 33 receptions. They have to throw it a lot. A lot of guys are getting the ball, but that Cam Camper, I think he has like triple the receptions that anybody else on the team has. But they do try to run it, and they do run it 40% of the time, even though they're throwing it so much. So they run it behind 2 senior running backs, Sean Shivers and Josh Henderson. They're both very similar as far as the physicality of them. Shivers gets the majority of the workload. The team is averaging 114 yards per ground on the game, but the running backs, they have 3 running backs actually that are going over 4 yards per carry. So they have 3 capable running backs that are able to run effectively, and they're not afraid to put their head down and get those extra yards. They both run hard and they break through arm tackles. So again, they're not afraid for contact. And once they get past that line of scrimmage and they get a head of steam going, they're hard to bring down. So Bill Busch did say that they run angry when he was talking about how he was planning for the game. He said the running backs, they're very physical and they run angry. So even if they're not running it through the running backs, it seems like a lot of their passes, since they are throwing so many, they're not all deep shots down the field. There's a lot of short passes, a lot of screen passes, trying to set up and allow their guys to make moves and try to get plays done that way. It's almost like a modified run game because they're throwing so many short passes, but they like to get rid of it quickly regardless, which could kind of put more pressure on our defensive line to get back there quickly. But I don't know if that's that they distrust their offensive line. Is that why they set up so many screen passes and are throwing it so quickly? Are they not trusting of their line to hold, for pass protection? They have given up 8 sacks in the last 2 games. So they've shown an ability, like if they can get pressure, the offensive line will allow sacks to happen. So that could, it's kind of a mixed bag. They're getting rid of it quickly, which makes it hard for the pass rush to get there. But if the pass rush can get there, the offensive line has shown the ability to give up those big negative plays. So the biggest thing I think out of all that was that the offensive pace is very high. So in the last game against Cincinnati, the offense snapped the ball over 100 times. That is a crazy workload. And then the game before that, I believe they went into overtime. So this offense has spent a lot of time on the field in the last 2 games, and you wonder how much of that they haven't had time to rest aside from the week. They haven't had a bye week. So I mean, that's a ton of workload. They've been on the field a lot. They've shown the ability to catch up in games, but that's going to be difficult for the defense to keep up with, especially ours, since we struggle to kind of get lined up every play anyway, which we'll get into that as well. But we struggle to get lined up in position the way it is, and if they're going to be running that quickly, we're going to have even less time to set ourselves and kind of check for what we need to be checking for. So that could spell some issues for Nebraska. Looking at the defense runs multiple sets. There's really nothing in particular that they are good at. They are just kind of solid. They're a solid defense, except for the fact that they give up a lot of chunk plays, which we'll get into. But the thing you notice the most when watching them and just kind of watching the last few games to catch up on them, they can be disruptive. They have 11 passes deflected already, and that's something that you see right away. You see the linebackers, the defensive linemen, the safeties, everybody's getting their hands up. Once that ball's in the air, everybody's throwing their hands up to try to knock that thing out. So it's very noticeable when you watch them. And it's not just the defensive linemen. A lot of times you'll see the linemen get their hands up to try to make something if they can't get back to the quarterback. Everybody's putting their hands up, and I think they were pretty high, highly ranked last year in passes deflected, and that causes a lot of turnovers. As I mentioned, they have 11 passes deflected this year, and that has led to 7 turnovers. I believe there's 4 interceptions and 3 fumbles. But you combine that with the 10 sacks over the 4 games, and again, that just plays into them being disruptive. So they have the ability to get back to the quarterback, which, given our offensive line struggles, that's not great to hear. But that's going to happen once we get into Big Ten play. We're going to play a lot of tough defenses, so this is kind of our best opportunity to show improvement there. Looking back at their defense, though, the linebackers seem to be the biggest upside of their team right now, the biggest strength of their team, and that's all behind senior linebacker Cam Jones. He is leading the team with 43 tackles right now, and he seems to kind of be everywhere. If you are not looking for number 4, then then it's going to be an issue. If you don't see him, he's going to pop up somewhere. So the linebackers in general altogether seem to be like they hit hard. They stick guys at the line of scrimmage. There's not a ton that gets past them if you can get to them. But outside of that, though, they've struggled. If you can bounce it to the outside, those linebackers, if you can neutralize the linebacker core, the secondary, the line has shown struggles to bring guys down. It's very similar to Nebraska in the way that the secondary has struggled with those tackles, and once they miss that tackle, then the offenses can bust off bigger chunk plays. They are vulnerable to the deep ball and busted runs as well, as I mentioned. So they've given up 23 chunk plays this season, which I believe leads the nation. So they might be semi-decent at defense, but once they start giving up those chunk plays, then the offenses start to get rolling, and then they start losing games. They've only lost one, but there was one where they also barely won it in overtime. So they could have easily lost that game had the field goal gone in for the other team. But either way, it's kind of a mixed bag again. It's very similar to our team. We have areas that we are successful in, but those big chunk plays are going to be what kills you, and they've been giving up a lot of that, the same as ours. So this matchup kind of is even all the way through. Their offense has shown sparks. They've shown offensive output, but their defense is kind of keeping the other teams in games, and that's been a struggle for them. Looking at their special teams, it's really, average. Charles Campbell hasn't missed a kick this year. He is 9 for 9 with a long being of 51 yards. Their punter is averaging 39 yards per punt. They haven't had any really explosive return game. So, their special teams isn't a negative, but it's not a positive either for them. So getting into the keys for the game, what does Nebraska have to do to win here? First and foremost, the defense needs to step it up. Bill Busch has only had 2 weeks to get them started and get them reset and focused since he's taken over. He hasn't had a game yet to show improvement since Chenander was let go. But he has mentioned, and Miggy has mentioned too, that they've simplified the calls and they've simplified the checks. So there's not as much going on pre-snap. So they can get in their positions and they can kind of look what they need to look at, and then that's what they need to do. It's very simple, and hopefully that leads to guys getting in position, just kind of playing more free. They're not so much going on in their head. They're just playing football. A lot of these guys seem like they have a good football IQ. Reimers, for instance. I always say Reimer, for instance. Last year, he showed the ability to get to the ball no matter where the ball was going. He was good in coverage. He was okay in tackles. But he was kind of just everywhere. He was flying around, and you've seen that a lot more last year as compared to this year. Him and Henrich have missed a ton of tackles, and they've also kind of been out of position, and they've taken bad angles. So maybe if there's less going on in their head, they're not thinking so much, they're just kind of playing more free, they will play better football as part of that. Some guys, you just got to let players play sometimes, and I think that's kind of something that I'm hoping to see. As I mentioned, the defensive line could also get back since their offensive line has allowed the sacks this year. I expect the defensive line to produce pressure this game. They haven't been so consistent at that this year. And as I mentioned, Baszlik has a big arm, but he's inconsistent. So as I mentioned, he has roughly a 50% completion rate. And even when some guys are wide open, there's guys streaking down the field. And this has been such a frustration for their fans to watch. They're wide open, and he'll either sail it or he'll underthrow it. And a lot of that seems like what Adrian Martinez was doing last year. He would either sail it or he would underthrow it, and they're kind of like, he was wide open. But you also have to wonder, every time he drops back to throw a pass, he doesn't know if there's going to be somebody slipping through because of that offensive line. It's even when you have a clean pocket, you're still worried about it. So even in coverage, his decision making has been questionable. So he either sails it, he underthrows it, or if he does throw a good pass, he is often throwing it into coverage or double coverage. And so that gives the defense a lot more opportunities to pick it off. And he especially struggles with this under pressure. So as I mentioned, it's kind of a mind game. Once that offensive line starts leaking, once he starts feeling that pressure, even in clean pockets, he's going to feel pressure when it's not there. So if the defensive line can make it difficult for him and not make it a clean game for him, then I think that that's going to benefit the corners. Speaking of the corners, they need to keep tight to their guys as well. We've seen a lot of them playing off the line of scrimmage this year, too far off the line of scrimmage. And a lot of people aren't understanding that, but I think that it was designed that way. Chenander was pulling the coverage back because he didn't trust the defensive line so much, and he wanted to make sure that everything stayed underneath. He didn't trust those guys necessarily to keep up with their man. Again, I don't know if that's a trust issue with the defensive line, if it's a distrust in their inexperience, or maybe the players themselves are lacking confidence, so they're backing up to try to keep it underneath. If you can keep the guy in front of you, you know he's not going to burn you. So that does lead, though, to a lot of first downs that you could otherwise prevent. A lot of third and threes or third and fours, you're like backing off 10 yards, and that guy just runs a post route, and he has easy first down there. So again, they kind of need to burn that keep everything underneath mentality and play more confidently, put more pressure on their wide receivers, and stop giving up so many first downs, because there will be opportunities to make plays on the ball this game, and they need to capitalize on that. If they're playing too far off, they're not going to have the timing to get to the ball. If they're playing on their guy and they can have confidence in their speed, Tommy Hill was so pumped up, and he shows so much confidence in his ability. We need to see that. We need to see him be able to keep up with these fast wide receivers and make a play on the ball. Once these guys catch an interception, you only have one guy on the team, I believe. Marquez Buford has he only has one. No, he has 2 interceptions on the year, but I believe he's the only one. Once Tommy Hill gets a pick, and he's been close a couple of times, once he gets a pick, that confidence just solidifies, and I think he will play more confident in his game. But they need to do that as well. So across the board, tackling hopefully has improved this bye week. The running backs, as I mentioned, have shown that they will run through arm tackles. So we need to make sure that we're able to wrap up and bring them down, especially the linebackers, because they have struggled with that. And they also need to be able to plug up those lines when those gaps are opened up. So the defense has a lot to show, and if they're not able to hold Indiana under 30 points or right around 30 points, I think that's going to put the offense in a tough position, and they haven't shown so much ability to do that this year. So that's first and foremost. The defense has to show up in this game for us to have a chance. Number 2, speaking of offense, hopefully the offensive line can hold up against Indiana's defensive line. They're not world beaters by any mean. They're not talented. They're not as talented or as aggressive as previous Indiana teams have been. As I mentioned, they are averaging 2.5 sacks per game, though, so they do show the ability to get back there when given the chance. So the offensive line needs to show more than they have in the previous 4 games, and if they can't keep Casey Thompson clean, or give Anthony Grant or Irving Jr. gaps to run through, or even just don't even bust open a gap. Just keep them from getting hit behind the line of scrimmage and give them an opportunity to get that momentum going. If they can't do that, it's going to be a long day for this offense. Casey has shown that with enough time and a clean pocket, he's a reliable quarterback. I do think that he kind of, I don't know what exactly it was last game, but it seemed like he wasn't rolling out. Like if there was pressure, he wasn't moving away from the pressure. He was kind of just sitting there and taking the sack. He has shown the ability to run on it and scramble with it, but I wonder if he's trying to show what he can do with his arm. But again, he just needs to play. Players need to play. He needs to stop thinking about it so much. If he feels the pressure, he needs to roll out. And I think that's still going to be effective in this game, being able to roll out of the pocket and throw it to wide receivers. Trey Palmer should have a decent game. And getting into that, depending on the weather, someone needs to have a breakout game. Trey Palmer has shown the speed and talent to hurt them with a deep ball. He has shown the ability to be that deep threat, as well as the guy that can run over the middle. I was surprised with as much as he has been utilized in the offense and as many receptions as he has. I believe he has the most receptions of a Husker in their first 4 games in Husker history. So he has shown the ability to be utilized effectively, to be a playmaker, and he got his first touchdown last game. I was surprised that he hadn't had one before that, but this is an opportunity for him to have a breakout game. I mentioned that they give up a bunch of chunk plays. Cincinnati had like 3 or 4 plays that were past 40 yards, like big bomb throws that the wide receiver just outrun their secondary and was able to bring it down. So Trey Palmer has shown the ability to jump for the jump balls, and those ones that are contested, he shows the ability to grab those and bring them down. So I expect him to have a good game, barring that the weather isn't an issue. And it does look like the wind could potentially impact the game, as I mentioned earlier. The gust could be as high as 30 miles per hour. Even on the low end, it looked like they were projecting 20 mile per hour, winds during the game. And if that is the case, I think that they're going to look more towards the running game and those short passes to kind of get the offense going. And I do think that that's because the deep ball would be risky. Even if it's, pretty calm, if you throw a deep ball in the air, a gust could come through and then that's a pick. Or, it makes it a lot more risky to push the ball down the field so far if there's wind. So I think that the running backs are going to have to be more effective at making use of what space they do get. So if the Grant and Irving Jr. duo is effective at bouncing it out, or if the offensive line somehow shows some massive improvement and they're able to bust open some holes, you're still going to have to get past the line of scrimmage. You're still going to have to get past those linebackers. Grant has shown that he's shifty and powerful at the same time. Irving has shown that he's shifty and quick. So Indiana has shown a weakness for once guys get rolling, once guys get like a steam of head going, they're hard to bring down, and their secondary has shown the inability to tackle. So that momentum will carry them through, and I think that will turn 4 yards if they can get out there. It can turn 4 yards into 5, 6, 7 yards per carry. So regardless of if we lean on the passing game or the running game, I think that there's an opportunity for a lot of skill guys to have big games. And I mentioned that. So, but also back on the running thing. So Indiana statistically has had a decent run defense this year, but that's because they've also played teams that don't particularly, specialize in running the ball. When they played Illinois and Western Kentucky, they allowed both of those running games to get over 200 yards on the ground in that game. So Grant, I think, is by far the best running back that they will encounter or have encountered so far. And so if he gets the opportunity to, he needs to run with it, literally. And he should have a big game. So getting into the final prediction. So the spread right now is Nebraska is favored by 5.5, and the over and under is 61. I honestly don't know what to think about this game. I was kind of surprised that anybody was favored, especially by 5. Maybe like 2.5 would make more sense. But then how do you pick which team? Because as I showed, both teams are pretty similar all the way down the line. The offenses have shown sparks, and the defenses have shown the inability to keep teams down. So I'm not sure how you can favor either team to win given the season this far, but I do think it's going to be an offensive showing. Both offenses going against both of those defenses should have some success. But, you never know. And maybe they're favored because of the atmosphere at Memorial Stadium. Like I mentioned, it's going to be a night game. Maybe they'll have a little extra juice because it is also homecoming. So homecoming at night with the light show before hitting the road for 2 games. Maybe they'll have a little extra energy going into the game. But I just worry that it's going to be a lot more closer than Husker fans maybe would like because of the way our defense has struggled. I hope that Mathis and Nelson and Tanner eat that quarterback because they're so amped up. But, I just worry that Bill Busch hasn't had enough time. He talked this week that he would love to have had spring ball to kind of get his guys ready, but maybe simplifying the game and allowing them to play and having just hammer down on technique instead of mind stuff so much. It's great for guys to think about football and think about the game while it's going on, but I think sometimes you just kind of have to play more free. But maybe those fresh eyes will spark something on this defense. And there has been minor tweaks to the depth as well. The linebackers and that nickel slot have kind of been shifted around. So maybe little tweaks is all it's going to take, and maybe adding tackling back into practice, for God's sake. I couldn't believe that was a thing, but that's a whole other thing to talk about. But until the defense shows improvement, I can't trust that they're going to be able to hold teams down. So I think that this is going to rely on the offense very heavily going into the game. But I don't expect the offense to struggle, especially Casey has shown he can play well. Last game was obviously, a non-factor because of the offensive line allowing the Sooners to bust through as much as they were. But as long as he gets enough time and he isn't, forced into bad decisions because of the pressure, he has shown that he is a consistent quarterback. He makes good decisions and he goes through his reads very quickly. So, and again, he does show the ability to scramble when he needs to, but I'm not sure if it was just the fact that he is getting hit so hard and so often last game. They actually pulled him and brought Chubba Purdy in. So I don't know if that's what it was, but if he can just play his best ball, the team is so much better because of that. So I think it's going to be an explosive showing for a lot of the skill guys. And as I mentioned, even if the wind becomes a factor, I think that Grant and Irving Jr. are able to be leaned on heavily. I think that they are more than capable to carry the offense down the field well. And I think that the team has a good chance to win if they play well. The defense they just need to not play terribly, which is asking a lot given how the season has gone thus far. I don't want to get into I don't want to get too deep into how much this game specifically means for the Huskers season for the rest of the year. But this is probably the last game that Nebraska gets favored in for the rest of the season unless we can show some kind of improvement and get some momentum going. This should be the last game we've been favored in. So if we can't win this game, which is the easiest game left on the schedule, I think that the rest of the season looks a little bleak. But if we blow this game without some kind of positive to take away from it, I think that the fans could certainly check out. I think Nick Baugh and Bo Ruud brought up on their podcast. If you don't listen to that, by the way, that's one of my favorite things to listen to about Husker football. Those two guys are hilarious. Bo Ruud brings in a lot of actual knowledge about football and technical knowledge, but those two guys, they've been friends since high school, even maybe before that, since 8th grade. But I mean, their chemistry is funny. So if you haven't got a chance to listen to the Nick Baugh podcast, go check that out. But they made the comment that this is the Super Bowl for fan engagement. This is such a big deal because if we lose this game without some kind of silver lining to pull away from it, fans could check out for the rest of the season. Fans could lose interest and fans could stop showing up. So that sellout streak goes. The team starts to feel that. The team starts to feel the support go away. I don't think it's to the point of abandonment. I don't think that you're going to see an empty stadium or that you're going to see fans completely give up on the season. But the amount of support that Nebraska is known for, I think that you're just going to feel like a drop-off. And the team's certainly going to feel that. Even though they say that they try to stay off social media and stuff, you're going to feel the energy leave the program for this season. And you don't want the players to check out as well this early into the season, even though, it's October, or it will be October for the game. You don't want them to check out in October when you have a hellish November schedule coming up. So you play Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, and Michigan in November. So not in that order. I don't remember what order it is, but if the players throw in the towel, then November is going to be hell for the team, and Minnesota will run for 1,000 yards on us. So, but I think given the situation, you have to give Mickey Joseph the benefit of the doubt, and he hasn't brought up once giving up on the season. He hasn't talked about that. That hasn't been introduced to the team through him. So he seems to have the guys pretty still amped up and on track. He and Busch have both talked about how guys are still flying around in practice. They're still committed to the season. And how bought in they still are to this program and to Mickey Joseph. Like, there was no, Scott Frost was my guy, I don't want to play anymore. Like, there was none of that. He is still a guy that a lot of those players respect. And Bill Busch as well. I think that he mentioned that being the special teams coordinator and having so many guys from defense and offense and special teams, having so many guys on special teams, he has a connection with each one of those guys. So now that he's coaching the defensive side of the ball, he already knows a lot of those guys, and he knows a lot of their personalities and what they're good at. So a lot of guys are still bought in, and I hope that it stays that way, and I'll take them at their word. I'll let the game kind of do the talking for them. With that being said, I predict the score to be a Nebraska victory at 38-31. Again, I think that it's going to be an offensive game. So I think that over and under of 61 is pretty low, considering that both of these defenses are so bad. So I think you could take the over if you're a betting person, but I wouldn't touch the who's going to win it because it's a toss-up. That could literally flip. Nebraska could lose the game 38-31. So I am biased, obviously. I am a stupid Husker fan who sees through a big red lens every week before game day. So it's just the way it's going to be. It almost sounds like I'm depressed about the season, but I'm still optimistic. I want to see something to grab onto. I want to grab onto the team. I want to, ride off into the sunset with Mickey and Bill Busch on. I want something to grab onto. I'm willing to hold on to this season as long as they give me something to hold on to. So that's going to wrap up this week's preview. If you have any comments, another question I have. So do you guys like this kind of breakdown where I break down the opponent in depth every week, or do you prefer that I kind of move towards more what Nebraska needs to do in the upcoming game? I do the keys at the end, but is it necessary for me to go through the opponent? I personally like to look at the opponents and see what guys I need to look out for, what players I need to look out for on their team, what they're good at, what their strengths and weaknesses are. But I'm doing this more for you guys. I can look up stats all I want, but do you guys like more the in-depth opponent kind of previews, or do you want me to focus more on what Nebraska needs to do every game? Let me know either way in the comments below. Make sure to like the video again and subscribe to the channel, or you can let me know on Twitter at Cobsmacked Media. But until next time, go Big Red.